This is great. Welcome. Welcome to all those that will view this, what we view as an exciting and more importantly, informative night. Uh, Tonight is a conversation. It's not a talk at you situation. It's really a conversation about facts, faith, and fears as it relates to COVID. So often conversations like this happen and they're just one way. It's all about supplying you with information, trying to dumb you down and accuse you and make you feel bad for not receiving the COVID vaccine. But this is really a two-way street where we really wanted to know and have a conversation about what the real fears are, legitimate fears, fears of those who are educated and informed. Because as we look at those that are left, there are many people who are educated and informed who have still not received the vaccine. And for the culture, the conversation is why. I'm Pastor Terrace King of the Liberty Grace Church of God, a church in West Baltimore that's trying to make a difference in the lives of people. And we're looking at this situation that we as a family of Baltimore are struggling with. And we grasp upon the words of Frederick Douglass, where if there is no struggle, there is no progress. And certainly we have struggled through this pandemic. And we are prayerful, hopeful that there will be progress through the pain we've experienced. But often, in order to have that progress, you need a champion. And so tonight's conversation isn't to folks of my age, isn't to the 50, 60, but to our younger generation and to hear them. And so tonight we chose a champion in the way of Pastor Michael Phillips to come and really navigate and facilitate this discussion, to talk about what we are going through collectively. One of the things I want to say to you is you have an opportunity during the course of the night to let us know in this process if you want to be a champion. This is all sponsored by the National Minority Quality Forum. And one of the things at the forum that really works many times as a healthcare arm of the Congressional Black Caucus and other organizations across the country, what they focus on is not just COVID, but the health of people of color across this country. What we understand is that this discussion about health and health improvement is broader than COVID. That this is the tip of the iceberg, a piece that has opened the door. And we are prayerful and hopeful once again that this session that is being recorded is one that we can go back to, look at some tidbits and some knowledge and gain something from this experience. And so tonight I want to turn this over to Pastor Phillips as he goes forward along with his panelists to have a discussion once again about Baltimore's young people and what they are facing in terms of the fears and concerns. And let me say, there's some fears and concerns that people have who've received the vaccine. The facts and what has pushed us in this direction, those of us walking by faith and not by sight. And so with that said, we turn it over to Pastor Phillips. And as we do in church, I receive him by saying, amen.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So delighted and really excited to be a part of this conversation. I think it's an important conversation that we need to continue to have for our community, for those of us who are people of faith, for those of us who are not. I think it's an important conversation for our city at large, and of course our state, and ultimately our entire society nationwide. We have some phenomenal women with us tonight that's a part of this panel, and I'm excited to be on here with them. I'm just glad to be a fly on the wall in this conversation. I don't know how much value I'm going to add whatsoever, but I'm really glad to have both of them with us this evening. We have Dr. Anika Hines on with us. She has a PhD, of course, from Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School anyway. And she is also a professor, assistant professor in health behavior and policy at Virginia Commonwealth University. And I'm so ecstatic to have her on here tonight. One of the things I love about her bio is it talks about her being a researcher and a published researcher in health equity. And I love that aspect of her work. We also have Taisha. You're going to have to tell me your last name because I didn't get a chance to ask you, and I am not going to butcher it. You're not going to have me out here like that. So you got to tell me your last name real quick. And
Karume.
Karume. See, I knew I was going to get it wrong. Karume. And we're so delighted to have her on here tonight. She holds various degrees as well and very accomplished. And also is still a student, if I'm not correct, at Coppin State University.
Yes, I'm a DNP student at Coppin, yes.
Yes, wonderful, right here in Baltimore City. And so we're so glad to have you both on tonight. There are so many people who are hesitant towards the vaccine. There are people who are pro-vaccine. But I want to start tonight as we get this conversation going by addressing just some of the issues around COVID in general, right? And both of you can speak to that. And as we're getting going, for those of you who are going to watch this, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what your fears are, what your concerns are, if you have them. But we do want to hear them. And as we're having this conversation, whatever strikes you, just go ahead and write it down in the comment section, what you are dealing with, what your concerns are, what's your trepidation, what's your reservations around moving forward, around health in general, and certainly around COVID-19 and vaccinations. And so we want to hear from everybody out there if you're listening. But one of the things I want to address tonight, and I'm assuming, Dr. Hines, that you can speak to this, is just the essential fear around understanding some of the things and protections we have against COVID without vaccination, right? Of course, I would assume that that's part of the plan to be safe and to be healthy. But one of the fears that was being spread around was about, washing your hands, and them saying that, washing your hands is not completely effective, right? Just something simple, right? And I think sometimes we can go so far in our minds as to what the fears and concerns are that we can't take a step back and just address some of the simple things that relates to COVID. And so there's just a few of them. Washing your hands is one. The disease being an airborne disease, and you're thinking if you go outside and you breathe in the air, it's a rat. Stuff like that. What are some of those simple things just related to COVID-19, not vaccinations, that you can speak to in this moment?
Well, I think it's interesting because I too have heard of people who are saying, oh, it's in the air, I can't go outside. I'm like, the air is also in your house. And so guys, you can't get away from the air. You're breathing your hair. You're going to be breathing air, right? And so, what happens when we think about airborne transmission, we're thinking about people basically exhaling, if they're infected, exhaling, COVID-19 and, us subsequently inhaling it. And that's why the whole mask thing is important. That's why touching surfaces, sanitizing surfaces is important. That's why washing your hands with soap for at least 20 seconds. Yes, that does kill it. It kills it.
Yeah. Sing your favorite song and go and get it in.
In fact, if you go through the happy birthday song, not black happy birthday, but regular happy birthday, do that twice, 20 seconds. And
you can't do the Stevie Wonder version. We can't do the
well, you could, but Stevie's gonna take you 2 minutes. Stevie's gonna take you 2 minutes. Okay. I'm not mad at it. If you want to take it to Stevie, just make sure you put the soap in the water all the way. We can harmonize and everything through the end.
All right.
Seconds, soap and water on your hands. It definitely helps keeping your hands off of your face. Just because we know the science. The science is it's basically an organism that's on surfaces. You touch the surface, you touch your face, the organism can then enter into the many orifices of your body, and then you can become infected. And it's just that simple. It's just that simple. But we should not be concerned that, oh, if I'm breathing, I'm in trouble, like, because the air is everywhere, everyone. So
yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible. That we could think that it's all in the air and we can't get away from it, right? But we can. It's okay, right? Taisha, I got one for you that I want you to speak to, particularly around young people, and you might have various opinions on this, but a lot of young people that I'm hearing from, millennial age, college age young people, are really anti-vaccine because they believe they cannot get sick, that it's not going to impact them, or if they do, they're going to bounce back. What would you say to that?
Well, it's a very sort of difficult situation, because I remember in my earlier college days and thinking that I was invincible and I could do any and everything and not really sort of suffer any consequences. The difficulty with COVID is that the symptoms mimic so many other things. And that is I think one of the more difficult things when it comes to this whole invincibility idea, because feeling like, oh, I have the flu, or oh, I have a cold, or oh, I have allergies, or oh, I have this, or I have that. And then it's not that, it's COVID. So we have to just kind of be mindful of the fact that, yes, we might be young and we might be healthy, but COVID doesn't care if you're young and healthy. It can take you down just like anything else. And, particularly in POC communities, it's hitting us significantly harder. It's hitting us at a higher level. So we just definitely have to kind of look at those thoughts, and also just really be aware that COVID is here, whether we want it to be here or not. COVID is here. And so we have to take that into consideration and just make sure that we are doing the things to keep ourselves healthy. As Dr. Hines was saying, I mean, washing our hands. I think the one thing that COVID has done for us has made us realize that we have been living pretty foul for a very long time. And when you think about something as fundamental as proper hand washing, I mean, I think, when you're in college, you're living in a dorm, you're constantly on the go, and you're doing this and you're doing that, and you really don't think about hand sanitizing and all of that kind of stuff. And I think what COVID has done is brought that to the forefront. So, students just have to be mindful that it's here, and we have to make sure that we are protecting ourselves.
Yeah, that's incredible. So now that kind of makes me pivot towards how do we move forward? How do we address the issues or the barriers that are in our path to move forward for not just vaccinations, but overall health too? So that's a much broader discussion. And I don't know if the time lends itself to that. But as we're talking about some of the facts and some of the fears, what are ways that we can consider moving forward with our overall health, particularly in communities of color? And what are some of the barriers that are going to prohibit us moving forward due to COVID-19? And jump in. I want either one of you to jump right in on that subject.
So one of the things that comes to my mind is really kind of this historical thought process within the POC community across the board, is this whole idea of medicine being this negative thing. And, they're experimenting on me and they're trying to use me as a guinea pig. And this whole idea that, you're not trying to treat me per se, you're trying to make a dollar, you're trying to use my insurance or whatever the situation is. And I think one of the biggest difficulty, one of the bigger difficulties is the fact that we have to, as a people, get past that and understand that there are laws now, there are rules, there are regulations, to Tuskegee can't happen anymore. And if it does, a lot of people are going to be sued for a lot of things, which at that time, wasn't a thing. But so we have to kind of educate ourselves into what is going on and what's available right now. And the fact that we need to take our own responsibility for our own health and go to the doctor and listen to what they have to say and be able to advocate for yourself and say, I don't know what that means. Can you explain that? Have that conversation with your provider to make sure that you understand what your health issues are, so that if you need to go somewhere else, to a different provider, you have some sort of symptom, you can very easily articulate that back to that provider, and they can say, hey, I think you need a COVID test, or hey, let me bring you in for this or that. I think, unfortunately, because of history, we tend to overall do ourselves a disservice. And I think, that has now, I won't even say trickled, I think it's kind of hurricaned itself into COVID, because it's like, oh no, I don't want that, but it's, we have to be aware of what's out there now, and also be knowledgeable that we have to be responsible for our own health.
I think that's incredible right there. You really opened up this discussion in a powerful way to talk about the trauma and the history that we've had as a community about health in general. And so, Dr. Hines, you're talking to a young person right now who has that understanding of that history and is deeply concerned about all of these theories and myths or beliefs around COVID-19 and vaccination. What would you say to them concerning that?
Yeah, I would say, so first of all, thank you so much for your comments. I think you were right on point with regards to the level of mistrust that's often experienced by our communities. I think we also, though, have to acknowledge that this is not a completely irrational, out of nowhere thought, right? There are actually historical events that led to where we are right now in relationships to health institutions. Now, we don't stay here, we don't dwell here because, we know we need to move forward. We know that those institutions and we need to be proactive in taking care of our health. And it's really important that we engage with those institutions and that we hold those institutions accountable. So on one hand, I want to say, if you are, suspicious of your healthcare, you are not strange, because we still know today, when we look at disparities in health, in the context of even where people are insured, when people have the same amount of resources, Black people are just treated more poorly. There's unequal treatment. There's a whole publication about it that was put out over 20 years ago. So we know that Black people are receiving unequal treatment, even though we're doing much better. As Taisha said, no longer can they, experiment like Tuskegee and so on and so forth. There are human subjects protections that protect us from those sorts of things. Still, we encounter these biases. We encounter racism in our interactions because our healthcare system is just a smaller world, a smaller representation of our broader society. And we know what we're up against when we're outside of healthcare, if you're thinking about policing or in our neighborhoods. But I say that not to discourage you or to incite hopelessness, because we should be hopeful, because we are also powerful in our community. If we think about the assets that we have, especially within the context of the Black church, which has continued to be a supportive, pivotal, trustworthy fixture in our communities, we can really stand on those foundations to move forward, to think about our health, not only in terms of what happens in the doctor's office, but what we eat, exercising, and lots of programming that churches are taking on now, even and especially our mental health. And I think that's a true kind of highlight from the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only did COVID-19 basically, what did you say, Taisha, blow everything up, it just brought a hurricane through to highlight all of these inequities happening, but it also brought us a huge opportunity to put into place programs that will really speak to the root causes of lots of the disparities, from hypertension, diabetes, mental health, all of the things, and to really support us more holistically in terms of our physical, mental, and spiritual health. And so I think we should look at COVID-19 not just as this disaster that happened, but it blew up some systems that needed to be blown up. And so now we have the opportunity to build as communities, rebuild back in a better way, the things that have previously kind of disenfranchised us.
Listen, if we were in church right now, I would give you an offering That was absolutely incredible. You know, we have to acknowledge the pain that we've experienced historically, but also we are positioned, unlike any other time in history, to be able to move forward in an equitable way as it relates to health, our holistic health, mentally, physically, all the way around, because of what has happened. This level of disruption that has upended everything has opened the door for us to be able to move forward as a community in a powerful way. And so, you know, I'm going to mess with both of you for a second here, because as we talk, you know, as subject matter experts and, you know, as a community leader, we're talking about this with a level of confidence and knowledge and experience and wisdom. But a moment of honesty and transparency is going to be very helpful to somebody out here trying to figure it all out. And so I want to ask you, what were your fears when it came to COVID-19? Did you have them, and do you still have them?
Go ahead. You go ahead first.
Okay. I would say initially I was working in the clinical setting. So I've worked continuously during COVID.
Wow.
So I would say initially I was extremely fearful of like everything. But one of the things that was really important to me was, again, you know, educating myself on what is COVID, like what is it? What does it look like? What is it supposed to do? Where are they saying it comes from? But also in listening to the CDC and what they're saying. And so knowing that things are changing very quickly, because this is the newest thing right now. Like everything is COVID, but giving myself the opportunity to filter through all this stuff, and taking time to really kind of learn about it. I was definitely apprehensive initially about the vaccine. Being a healthcare provider, they vaccinate us anyway, so it don't really matter. But you know, I was excited about it, but I was also nervous. Now, nervous because this is new and, you know, it hasn't really been tested yet, but excited because I have the ability to be a physical face, right? A tangible being that's been vaccinated, and I don't have two heads, I don't have six legs, you know, I'm not, you know, sliced in half or anything of these other, you know, alienated type things. That people were kind of thinking of. And so that was important to me, because I wanted people to see, like, if you get the vaccine, I got it. I still have all the stuff that I started with. So definitely that, for sure.
Wow.
Absolutely. And now I shall confess. Pastor, let me tell you, I'm a scientist. I'm a public health scientist. I'm a person of faith, and I'm also Black. And let me tell you, when the vaccination first came out, I was hesitant. You know, I was really concerned around the messaging around it. You know, when we're talking, you know, March 2020, I was really like, oh, Operation Warp Speed, like what's happening? You know, I didn't know what was happening behind the scene, and the fact that these NIH researchers had actually been working on a similar virus, not the same, but a similar virus that they could learn from really quickly in terms of translating that into something that would be protective against this new virus. And so as the data came in, as I began to learn more, you know, as the trials went out, and, you know, as, you know, being engaged with the community, learning the scientific community, learning more about the safety and all those things, by the time they actually made it available, and it was available to me as someone who works within the context of healthcare, I said, sign me up. I got the shot as soon as I could get it. And because I knew, one, for the same reason that you said, Taisha, you know, seeing someone who looked like them would encourage even my family, who's not, you know, I'm the most educated person in my family. And so oftentimes they come to me for, advice about health related things. And so by taking that stance and saying, yes, I'm going to be vaccinated, I can tell my auntie when she's like, Anika, should I get it? Like, I'm just going to trust God. I'm like, okay, trust God and get the shot, auntie. Trust God and get the shot. And so, in essence, it's just the way I explained to her that it's just a way that your body builds up a certain protection so that if it does encounter the COVID-19 virus, then you will already have some protection in place that, some antibodies around ready to fight it off. It's like putting up the wanted sign. So if it shows up on the scene, they'll know it's time to kick them out, basically. And so, yes, I was hesitant in the beginning, even being a scientist and understanding much more science than most people, and even being a person of faith, believing that God will protect us, but when I learned more and I got information and I learned the facts and I learned that this was really a much longer process going on than what I realized in the beginning, I took the step forward in faith to get the shot and, have been protected since.
You just said something incredible, and thank you both for your transparency. And Taisha, thank you so much for serving on the front lines, as a healthcare worker in the trenches. I can't even imagine having to do it, and I know you've done it with such grace. And so I just want to say thank you for your efforts there. But you said something, Dr. Hines, that was powerful. I got the shot in faith. I got the vaccination in faith. Faith doesn't allow us or require us to check our intellect at the door to have faith. We can get the information, we can get the understanding, and it's going to take, a step of faith to be able to move forward. For me, I'm going to take a step back and bring a different approach to where my fear was when all this started. From the beginning of COVID to the vaccine, I had a number of fears. Number one, having to wear a mask as a Black man, I was petrified and terrified that if I would walk in somewhere, they could immediately accuse me of doing something and I would be arrested or shot or something crazy. And it was just the truth. Or my son having to do the same thing. And so I tried to get the best medical mask possible, the N95. I had the big N95 on there so that everybody could see this is medical, okay? Don't do nothing crazy. But that was a real deep concern of mine. And then, of course, my people in general, because knowing that unfortunately our society has a culture of punishment as it relates to poor people, I was deeply concerned about individuals who are marginalized not having access if we did get a vaccine. And we did see that as the vaccines rolled out, that there was a difficulty with actually getting it. It's not as much anymore, but those were my concerns. And then, of course, when it came time for me to get vaccinated and choosing to be vaccinated, at first, I was like, yeah, I ain't doing it. I was like, nope, not happening. And it had nothing to do with faith. It had nothing to do with trusting God for my healing. None of that stuff. It was all around, I didn't trust the source. I didn't trust, all of the information that was coming around, and it didn't sound cohesive to me. And I was concerned about it all. But you hit on this, Dr. Hines, and what it is that either, to me, you get the virus or you get the vaccine. Those are your choices, because COVID's not going anywhere. And we're going to have to learn how to move forward with this being in our environment, just like other epidemics that we have had in our society. And so this brings me to a place, of course, if you're listening, if you're watching, you got questions, you got concerns, put them in the comment section. We want to hear them, man. We want to hear them. And though we can't answer them right now in this moment, trust me, we'll get back with you. We'll address some of those things. And hopefully we're hitting on some of them. But we want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what your fears are. We want to know what your concerns are. This brings me to another place. Post-COVID, for those of us who are vaccinated, for those of us who are not vaccinated, where do you guys see this going? Are there going to be requirements for vaccination? You know, are various institutions are going to begin to do that? What do you think, and what do you know about that process?
So there are a number of things. There are already some colleges that are requiring, I think about 400 across the nation, that are requiring their students to be vaccinated before they return home. I've heard that, you know, there are some workplaces that are also requiring vaccination. Now it gets really tricky because you're dealing with people's personal health information, and to the extent that you can ask people to divulge that, you know, there's a kind of a fine line governing that. But, you know, in terms of moving forward, I don't know that we will see, and I could be wrong, I don't know that we'll see a blanket mandate, but I foresee that perhaps private businesses, because I've already heard from friends who work at certain places that you know, their managers are requesting that they return, or, you know, in institutions where, like where I work, if you would like to forego some of the internal processes, like for instance, we had a symptom check every single day that you had to go through. We had, you know, certain kind of regulations that we had to participate in on a daily basis. You know, if you show that you had your COVID vaccination, then you no longer have to, you know, check in every day to say that you don't have symptoms, those types of things. And so I think, you know, I don't know, honestly, if we will move to a place where people will mandate per se, you know, COVID vaccination, but it's a good idea, because at the end of the day, the more of us who are vaccinated, it's a community service. The more of us are vaccinated, the fewer of us will become sick with COVID-19 at the end of the day, right? And the faster we do that, the faster we come to some sort of herd immunity, the less likely we are to get some of those mutations that are kind of more severely or more contagious. Because the longer that a virus gets to live in a population, the more time it has to mutate and change. So the sooner we get to a place where most people are vaccinated, the safer we'll all be. I will say that. Now, I think that, you know, we're moving more and more towards, you know, vaccination being more of a norm than not. But, you know, we have, you know, they have ordered in the past that, you know, students at schools, right now, the really young kids aren't even eligible for vaccination. So that's a whole nother story. But at least the 12 and 17, schools might start to you know, recommend at least, if not require, vaccinations, you know, to come back, because that's what they do for other types of MMR and so on and so forth. Again, don't quote me, but this is where, you know, in my opinion, this is where I see things going, even though none of that is really finite just yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Taisha, you have anything to add to that right there?
I definitely agree with Dr. Hines. I think that, you know, we have to definitely look at some of the businesses and what their ideas are going to be in terms of people returning to work. But in the context of like younger people, particularly like the college age, I know at Coppin there were some directives going around in terms of getting students vaccinated, that there's chatter around having more students on campus. And so obviously the vaccinations are going to be necessary. But I think what's important for folks to be sort of mindful of is moving forward, kind of like Dr. Hines was saying, COVID's not going anywhere. So we have to make sure that we continue, just as a people in general, that we continue to do the things that are protective of us. And it's important that we are getting vaccinated, and we're getting vaccinated because we understand, I mean, and Dr. Hines put this in the best of terms, we have to get to herd immunity. And a lot of times people hear that and they don't understand what that means. But I work with folks that have HIV. And so a lot of times I kind of equate it to HIV. Like, you do certain protections so you don't get HIV. You have to use the same protection, you know, you have to use protections so that you don't get COVID. Like, you have to do those things. And if we can continue to do those things, I can definitely see us moving in a positive direction. But I don't foresee at all COVID not being a thing ever at this point. I think it's even gonna, at a certain point, I feel like when you take your infant, your newborn, to their first pediatrician visit, COVID vaccine is going to be part of that list. I definitely see that coming.
Wow.
That's just my thought, because I think it has caused enough sort of worldwide like ruckus, so to speak, that people are really looking at it and really trying to see, how we can protect people. And, so that
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting thing to look into.
But there's no doubt that we are in a highly teachable moment, just, as a society. We will refer to this moment for the rest of our lives, as you were just speaking to. This is a part of us now. And how we choose to govern ourselves, how we choose to move forward, really needs to be with the understanding that we impact one another. If this last year has not taught us anything, is that we are responsible for one another. And in my eyes, taking care of my overall health is a responsibility to my family. It's a responsibility to my community. And I'm hoping that every person watching, young or older, whatever generation you're representing, could understand that this is a moment of responsibility that we have one towards another. And this brings me to the end of this conversation as it relates to faith. We talked about facts, we talked about fears. And I want to ask Reverend Terrence King to hop back in here in these last 5 minutes and join us here and understand as faith leaders, we have a responsibility to our community to continue to inform, not just to uplift, but to make sure we're having an impact in people's lives that's helping them to move forward. And this is one area that we have had a champion in Reverend King. And so as he talked about me being a champion, this man is the epitome, the embodiment of being a champion as it relates to health and health for our community. And so if you could, just for a minute or so, speak to the faith portion of this as it relates to people having a moment of faith and understanding that humanity will survive, that I got a feeling that everything's going to be all right. and if we really turn towards one another, it'll be all right a lot faster.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank both of the panelists with you. And I really appreciate what you have done tonight and your two panelists. I got to tell you, Taisha and Nakia, Anika, you've done a great job, both of you. I want to just talk for a minute about the church's role and responsibility, because I think part of what you're seeing, particularly in the church in Baltimore, when we're seeing this in other areas, is our taking on a role that is much broader than Sunday. There's service, then there's services.
Yeah.
Services is what gives us more than a trusted source mantle. Services really speak to, oh, you're hungry? I'll feed you. Oh, you need Wi-Fi? I'll provide it. Oh, it's a job? I'll point you in that direction. Services is also being that buffer that I've had a privilege to be between science and the sanctuary, where we have brought in, as you know, Michael Johns Hopkins, Sanofi, and Pfizer into a prayer service.
Yeah.
And said, in this environment, number one is not science. God gets the last word. But we are going to respect science. And as a scientist, as an occupational scientist myself, I'm not checking my intellect at the door.
That's right.
So you come into this room, but understand this is sacred space. And in this sacred space, it's about a holistic process that looks at people, not only their soul, but their mind and body as well. And so, yeah, I was really glad to hear Anika talk about the role that the church has played in terms of mental health through this pandemic. Lord, have mercy, because we have had to step in the gap. I was so glad to hear Taisha talk about this thing has blown this thing up. Now that we've blown the door open in terms of trust, the healthcare community, the governor, pharmaceutical companies have all come to the pastors. And the question is, now that the door has been blown open as it relates to our health, what's going to happen next? Not just in terms of COVID, but I have a responsibility to step in the gap and say, my people were sick before COVID ever came.
That's right.
Come on, let's talk about it now. We had diabetes before COVID ever came.
That's right.
Come on now. Everybody knows somebody that had hypertension before COVID ever came. Black women were dying at a 40% higher rate from breast cancer before COVID ever came. And what pastors are obligated to do is more than entertain, but to hold the establishment accountable. To hold the establishment accountable. I was so glad when Nick said, we have a reason not to trust the source sometimes. Wow. Do you know why? Because not only as a scientist and a pastor, but as a former federal executive for healthcare, I've traveled this country. And I'm not talking about the days of Tuskegee, but today there is unequal treatment of Black people across America. Come on, talk about that now. And as we are asked to trust, what will the system do to better our condition? That is the role of today's church. It's not a movement. Movements have times. They start, they finish, they accomplish their goal, but ministry has many movements.
Yeah.
No matter what movements we honor, whether it's the civil rights movement, and now the My Race Sure Does Matter, Black Lives Matters movement, when they come and go and accomplish their goals, pastors like Mike Phillips, God bless, are going to still be there serving the community. And so with that said, I feel like a benediction because I could preach a minute, right?
You already did. Listen. You already did that.
See, you knew you were playing T-ball when you put that one out there. I could preach a minute right now of the role that the church in its maturity is stepping into. And it's far more. We still say hallelujah on Sunday, but it's about the work we did Monday through Saturday.
Absolutely. And I want to say to every scientist, healthcare worker sitting in a pew, start a service in your church.
That's right.
The pastor might not know how to do it, but
That's
you
right.
have the expertise. And if you guys would get together, you could do something powerful for your community because it's important. I know you guys think pastors, have a degree in everything. We do not.
No, we do not.
No, we don't. No, we don't. But we want to activate the pew, and we want to activate all of that knowledge base of those incredible people who are dedicated members of our church to be able to glean information and use it so that we can build the programs and build the services.
That's right.
So that we can help the community.
That is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to cover tonight, Mike? This has been outstanding.
You guys absolutely were incredible. It was such an enlightening conversation. I'm so glad to meet you both and so glad to hear your thoughts. Thank you for lending all of that
So impressive.
valuable information to us tonight. Pastor King, you can close us out in prayer, sir.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I just want to say, and on behalf of the National Minority Quality Forum, we just appreciate you all being a part of this experience. We appreciate our panelists. We appreciate Pastor Phillips. Ladies, you just did a great job. We couldn't have done any better. And we want this to be viewed by Lottie Dottie and everybody. So send this. I had to get look, I haven't been in church. I've been Zooming for so long. I had to get all my church quotes in. Yes. So we are just so thankful. And Lord, we do thank you. We thank you for what you have done tonight, for what our eyes have seen, what our ears have heard, and what our hearts have felt. What we felt is sincerity. What we felt is people that are lifting up a word of truth, not coming in a snobbish way with their noses stuck to the sky, but God who come with a desire to help somebody else. Bless them. Bless their families. God, heal every person who has lost someone during this pandemic. Heal those who've lost those to COVID. Then heal those who've lost people from other diseases because they just couldn't find room for them in hospital beds, or they were afraid to go to the hospital because a virus was there. Whatever the reason, is still hurt. And so God, touch them right now. Now, God, here's what you have done. You are bringing us through a storm. What we've experienced, God, has been earth-shattering. But use this moment to remind us that God, all things, even this, works together for the good. We don't know how, but it works together. And so we trust you that from this there will be greater concern for people of color. That from this there will be help for the needy. That from this, God, you will work it out so that we see a day that is exceedingly and abundantly above all that we ask or think. We put it at your throne. This is your servant's prayer. Amen.
Amen, sir.
Amen. Amen. God bless you all. God bless you all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it has.
Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.